little digging onto this one. This is actually one of the first writing credits for the duo who worked on this. They've done some editing work, a lot of editing work, actually, over on TNG and DS9, and some directing work. But this was basically a new set of hands when it came to writing. And that's actually kind of interesting to me, because in my experience, generally there's only really two things that happen when you bring in some new writers to an existing show. Number one, it goes to hell. They have no idea what they're doing, and they produce crap. Number two, even if what they produce isn't amazing, it inflects new life. You know, it injects, new life into the work, so that there's something new, something that they can work with or add to, right? And I feel like this is one of the latter cases. This is not exactly a phenomenal episode. It does two things pretty damn badly, and it's a little obvious. And if I'm being honest, this is also an episode that's retreading ground. Anybody who's seen Deep Space Nine's Valiant has probably already seen most of the beats of this episode. And anybody who's seen TNG's Thine Own Self has already seen some of the beats of this episode. And I think there was an original series episode that did this as well. But, regardless of those things, this is still a good episode, I think. Mostly, I have to admit I am biased on the matter, because this episode actually does something with Harry Kim. Do you know how random and weird it is to see an episode that finally decides to frickin' do something with Harry Kim? How unusual it is for that to be a thing. I've pointed it out pretty much every single time it's happened, actually. Let's actually pull up my notes here. Yeah. So, there we go. Voyager is, of course, undergoing a major refitting and overhaul, which makes a lot of sense. See, Voyager was pretty new when it went out to the Delta Quadrant, and about 6-7 years without a refit isn't actually all that out of bounds. I know certain people here in real life who would assume 5-year refits, but even if that is the norm, it's not that out of bounds due to the 6-year refit. I mentioned this because my original note was, oh my god, this is their first overhaul that they've ever done. But when I really started thinking about it, I was like, actually, that's about right. That's okay, I'm with that. So I don't have any real problems with that. I do have one small complaint about it, though. They're talking about being done with this overhaul without the facility or supplies of, say, Utopia Planitia in about a week. I could just imagine. Janeway's like, all right, we'll settle down. How long will this take? A week? And I could just imagine, like, the entire engineering staff bursting out laughing. I know that they've got the whole, rocks into replicators thing going on in Starfleet engineers, but seriously? Anyways. So, I'm going to make a point here. There's a B-plot in this episode. It's pointless and it's stupid. I don't really have anything else to share about it whatsoever, other than the fact that it's pointless and it's stupid, except for one thing, and I'm going to save that for last, but I want you to have that in the back of your mind, okay? B-plot, pointless and stupid. You with me? Cool. So, Harry Kim is in the Delta Flyer, which is not a particularly large ship. It is basically a extended shuttlecraft, kind of the size of an RV, roughly. And they end up getting involved in a battle that's happening within a few hundred yards, or meters if you prefer, of where they are. Really? I mean, that is... I know we've talked about this before, and I know that this is a problem for science fiction in general, but space is kind of big. The odds of a ship being in visual range of another ship is actually legitimately microscopic. And yet, they happen to be right there to the point where the shots were firing right over the Delta Flyer to hit the other ship. Think about that for a moment. That's kind of insane, actually. But then, the other thing that really makes me think about that for a moment. Why did they not detect that beforehand? Remember, the Anari, the aggressors, supposedly, within this episode, do not have cloaking technology. So there had to have been a ship which you can detect at the hundreds of thousands of kilometers range, if not farther. I actually don't know how good the Delta Flyer scanners are, but I would say it's not out of bounds that they could probably detect them in the light years range away. And yet that ship is right there when they first detect it. And then it's already opening fire by the time they figure out what's going on. I don't even know what else to say about that. It does kind of speak to someone who is kind of inexperienced with regards to writing. And I mentioned that because there's several aspects. I'm not actually going to point out all the rest of them. There are several other aspects of the plot of this episode that are because plot. The overall arc of the plot is actually quite predictable, to the point where when I first saw this for the first time, I actually had fairly accurately predicted most of the beats of the plot from about the third or fourth scene. That being said, they did surprise me a couple times, and they do some good things with it. So I'm not really calling it out as saying this is a terrible episode that needs to be hated and just reviled forever. I'm just pointing out that this feels like an episode that was written by people who are not used to writing episodes. That's all. So I mentioned the obvious plot. One of the interesting things, though, is that they put in some honest-to-goodness foreshadowing. Like real, good foreshadowing. I only mention this because do you know how unusual it is? Sorry, I just realized you probably are hearing me cleaning my glasses. Do you know how unusual it is for me to notice good foreshadowing in Voyager? Usually Voyager has one of two types of foreshadowing. Either you never knew anything and therefore can't predict anything, also known as fake foreshadowing, or giant neon signs in the air blaring, this is coming up, this is coming up. So seeing honest-to-goodness real foreshadowing was nice. And I know what you're asking about. What am I talking about? These people come up, and they are armed. They say, who are you? Harry says, it's okay. I'm just this guy, blah, 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 blah. And they say, oh, no, we're not crew, we're passengers. The way he says that immediately made me go, you're not passengers, but you're armed. And you come onto the bridge expecting to deal with whatever you find there. And while I'm on the subject, isn't it interesting how the passengers were noticeably worried about the cloak more than anything else? That's a little more obvious, but both of these put in a nice little hint that, basically, they are not what they seem. Now, what I do like, and I'm going to go and skip forward in my notes a little bit here, is the fact that these guys are not the bad guys. They are not exactly the good guys. And we still don't actually know if they were telling the truth by the end of the episode. But the usual Star Trek pattern would be for these guys to actually be the bad guys and the Anari to be the good guys, and the Anari to act like the bad guys until the reveal, and the actual bad guys to act like the good guys until the reveal. And then all of a sudden, we're hideously evil. It's a very common, very typical Star Trek trope that goes back to the original series when they used to do the kind of message of, you can't judge a book by its cover, because that was kind of a newer thing back then in television, and it was a message that they believed they needed to get out there, so it kind of became a trope after a while. But they didn't quite do that. I like how they made out the Anari to be the bad guys, but not completely unreasonable. And they made out I can't actually remember the name of their race, the victims, the members of the Nightingale, to be not good guys, but at the same time not exactly bad guys either. There is some layers there, some honest-to-goodness desperation. There's a line where he talks about exactly what the Anari do. He mentions earlier, we come in peace, and then we declare you subjects. Again, the episode treats you as if you're intelligent, because first of all, that's actually a very smart way to conquer, if you think about it. Establish good relations with a people, and then presume them to be a part of your sovereignty. Even if they resist, there is actually a better than even chance, if you have done a good job of establishing positive relations with them, that they now consider themselves to want to be part of your sovereignty. That there would be resistance, of course, but there would be at least some members of their government or their military or their populace who would say, yeah, I'm okay with that. The second reason it treats you as smart, though, is they never bother connecting the dots between that and the siege. What we have here is a very classic carrot-and-the-stick approach. We come in peace. We bring offers of peace, friendship, resources, technology. There are hints that there are other things that they offered as well. And then, you are now ours. Welcome to the Anari Empire. And yet if you don't decide to join the Anari, that's when the stick comes in. And they don't come in and destroy you. They are not some typical oppressive regime. They kind of pull something like the Dominion would pull. Here's a massive blockade over your world. This blockade will prevent you from properly functioning as an interstellar race. And I thought about this for a bit. Not every world out there is Earth, after all. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, there's actually a lot of real life thought and work being going into this concept. But the idea is that after a certain point, a civilization might, because this is an unproven theorem, might reach a point at which it no longer has the ability to sustain itself off of a single planet. And it absolutely needs colony worlds, right? In order to be able to sustain the home world. I mean, how many works of fiction have examined that very concept, right? So the fact that this is a world that does not have access to the outside in any way, is completely blockaded in, is effectively, as he pointed it out, strangling them to death slowly. And that's actually brilliant in its own right. Because, and I hate myself for saying this because it is kind of despicable and horrible, but why bother wasting time and effort and resources on destroying things that you want? Remember, they're a conquering power, when you could just force them into subjugation. How long do you think it would take before the populace of those people would say, enough, I'm tired of watching my children starve, we surrender? Think about it. I find that part of the plot to be a little more interesting than most of the other aspects of the plot, with one big exception. And that's Harry Kim. Let me go ahead and say that, like I said, I really do like that they actually frickin' did something with Harry Kim. And I admit, kind of as a consequence of that, I am probably biased towards this episode more than I otherwise would be. Because I like Harry Kim as a character. I like Garrett Wang as an actor, and I like the fact that he gets to have some frickin' screen time. This is his episode, clearly and definitively. And it doesn't involve some love interest, thank God. I'm sorry, let me clarify for that for a second. Obviously, most of my longtime viewers who watch my other shows know that I'm not exactly pro-romance in my fiction. I'm actually kind of anti-romance in my fiction. But what I mean by that is, how many other Harry Kim episodes have not involved some kind of love interest? There are a couple, but not many. But no, this time, it's just about Harry Kim himself. His character growth, his characterization, the way he thinks of himself. We see in this episode that how he views Janeway, what he thinks of Janeway, because he tries to emulate her. Like 5 times in the episode, he says, this is what Janeway would do, or I'm doing what Janeway would do, or this is how Janeway does it, and there's no problems there. And that makes sense. She's the only captain he served under, remember. This is his first assignment. So it makes sense that an impressionable young ensign would have very much imprinted based on Janeway. Poor fellow. But I do like that idea because it shows how he perceives her, and as a consequence shows how he perceives being an officer. He also makes most of the typical command mistakes. And the beats are a little bit predictable, but they're well presented, and I'm okay with a predictable story as long as it's done well. Let me give you a slight side story. Don't worry, I won't ramble too long. When I first took my first manager job, I've actually worked as a manager several times in my life. It was at a fast food place. It was an Arby's. I'm not going to try and dress it up for you. But it was my first time being in charge of other people in a real sense, in a professional sense. And I'm like, okay, I've got this. And I did the same damn thing Kim did. I did. It's so natural for someone who cares, like Harry did, like I did, to not... we don't do this to hurt you or to hurt your morale or treat you like you're stupid, but we just want to take care of things, and we're used to doing things ourselves, right? The first lesson of being in command is commanding. And I know that sounds weird, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to actually get that lesson in your head. If you sit back, you push yourself back with experience and time, you're like, oh, okay, that's just logical. Because they need to gain experience. Your workers need to gain experience. They need to develop, grow, learn. They need to have confidence. They need to not think that their manager or their leader or their captain has no faith in them. And, of course, they need to be able to have a degree of independence, because in a crunch, when things are busy, or desperate or dire, you don't have the ability to micromanage everyone. And if you have not slowly and gradually over time given them that kind of leeway to function while still giving them command, they will not know how to operate in a crutch, or they'll just operate on their own instincts, which may be very wrong. You with me? I say that a lot, don't I? My friend Pax just made fun of me. You with me? I don't mean to. I'm sorry. Hope you don't hate me for it. I'm going to keep doing it because I don't mean to. But yeah, I've got this thing now to try and prevent me from fidgeting too much. I wish I could do these things walking or standing. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. Point being, that's the first lesson of command. It also dovetails nicely into the second lesson of command, which is ordering someone to do something unpleasant. Now, this is funny. I mentioned thine own self earlier. It took Troy a long time to learn that one of the key and critical command decisions that you have to be prepared to make in a military, I'm sorry, Starfleet's a military, my opinion, in a military, is ordering someone to their death. Ordering a friend to their death. She had to order Geordi, to his death in order to save the Enterprise. That's something that a commander has to face. And while that may seem ridiculous when compared next to Arby's or any other command or managerial position, the parallel is actually still there. It's just at a less severity, less severe, and less extreme kind of a situation. The consequences are much less dire when you have to order someone to do something like that. But you still have to learn that. You have to learn how to tell someone, I need you to do this, I need you to do it now. And you need to not go over the line on that. You don't need to do it all the time. Imagine for a moment, let's use the Star Trek parallel. Imagine for a moment if a certain captain was constantly ordering their officers to do things or their personnel to do things that was getting them killed, or was putting them in severe risk, or was brutalizing them, basically. That captain would probably be incredibly unpleasant and would probably get mutinied against fairly quickly. But if you do the too much in the opposite direction, where you refuse to let them do those horrible, unpleasant tasks, up to and including death, you're going to be at a disadvantage all the time, not just in a crisis situation. So learning to find that balance point is critical. It's kind of amusing because Kim didn't quite learn that on his own, did he? He had to have two other people smash that into his face. Seven, who very effectively talked him through the whole situation, brilliantly explained to him the precepts of both the first and second tenets of command that I just highlighted to you. And he had to have Loken, was that his name? The gentleman, the guy with the lines, basically explain this is how this is going to do and give kind of the commands himself in order to arrange for the cloak to be refixed, which saved all their lives. That was a crisis situation. Major props to Garrett Wang, by the way. He walked a tightrope in his acting during those scenes, because he didn't act like a, if most actors, most amateur actors, I should say, including myself, I would imagine, because I'm a terrible actor, if you were told, all right, you need to act like you're losing your cool in a command situation, go, would probably overact it, like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, right? But Garrett Wang hits the tightrope balance of showing someone who is very disciplined, who is also losing his cool. His Starfleet training and his experience are keeping his mask on, but you can tell based on his actions and his words that he doesn't know what he's doing and he is flailing. He's just not literally flailing. It's a subtle bit of acting, and I want to give praise where praise is due there. I also, I just want to point out something. Obviously, it's not really canon, although several people consider it to be canon, including me. But Star Trek Online, it's funny to me that Harry Kim became a captain in a fairly short period of time, as of Star Trek Online's, in the history that was continued after Voyager, leading up to Star Trek Online. The reason I find that interesting is because by his own statements in the episode, I might be a lieutenant commander by now. Keeping in mind the Dominion War, there's actually a really unpleasant situation. I've actually joked before about how Nog is his superior officer, but if you really sit back and think about it, that's not a joke. It's actually horrible. Because the main reason Nog was accelerated in command its status that quickly is because a lot of people died in the Dominion War. A lot of commanding officers. And there was this gargantuan push to elevate a huge number of Starfleet personnel up much quicker than they otherwise would be. Between that and the fact that Harry Kim has, by the time he gets home, 7 years of experience under his belt as an officer, yeah, it makes sense that he'd be fast-lined on the track, right? That brings up something else I wanted to talk about. One of the things I find interesting about Star Trek is that it posits an ideal. In other words, I have been asked before, if you don't get paid for doing blah blah blah, then why bother doing it? And the people who ask that question are thinking from a real life perspective, which makes sense. In real life, there are people who are perfectly happy being lazy and nothing, and I don't mean any offense by that, but at the same time, I kind of do, because I find that to be repulsive personally. From my own personal perspective, the idea of being lazy, of not trying to aspire or achieve anything, is repugnant. It feels like it would be wasting everything, all the effort and time that I myself have put into my life, as well as how many other people's time and effort has been put into my life. I want to do something, damn it. Now, I admit there's a degree of idealism in that perspective, but I know I'm also not the only one who feels that I want to do things, and if I had the access to do things, I would. So the idea here is, why open a Creole kitchen on Earth? Because you want to. Because it's your ambition to do so. Because you have that drive or desire to cook Creole cooking. And to share it with people. And to see their smiling faces as they step by and enjoy it. You don't get paid. You don't need to. Your needs and wants are met. Make sense? It is an idealistic perspective, and to be perfectly blunt, is probably the one and only aspect of the Roddenberry ideal that I personally buy into. The idea that people can want to do more than just exist. I bring that up because here in real life, there's usually 2 or 3 reasons, I'm of course massively generalizing, about why people become officers in the real life military. And of course I'm also only speaking from the perspective of the United States. I don't know how the militaries of other nations work. The first reason is money. You get paid more the higher rank you are, your family gets better taken care of the higher rank you are, and you get more benefits after you retire the higher rank you are. Money, 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 right? Just different aspects of it. The second is the prestige of serving your country. Okay, not going to really argue that one at all. And the third is a lot more debatable, but usually has to do with, shall we say, pressure. I don't want to say conscription, because that's not accurate. That's not what I mean. I mean societal and cultural pressure to serve or to function in that kind of a thing. I suppose I could also add to pay for college, but that would also fall into the money category. And again, we're talking specifically about the officer track, not just joining the military in general. What's the motivation for joining the military and becoming an officer in Starfleet? I bring this up because I think this episode highlights better than most episodes do, most of Star Trek really, that ideal. We've seen a bit of this before with certain characters. But most of the time we see someone who has that drive, they've already made it. Kirk definitely had the drive to command, the aspiration, the motivation. There's a word I'm missing. Hang on. I know a place where I can find this word. This is going to be so stupid. Ambition. I have a list called ambitions. That's why. The ambition to lead. Picard absolutely had the ambition to lead, and we see this several times. Sisko absolutely had the ambition to lead. But by the time we see them, they're already leading. We see very little of the build-up to that. And we see very little of the other characters building up to that. I think really the only other case that I can think of where they did some serious, significant story time built around the ideal and the desire to lead is actually with Riker. Best of Both Worlds Part 1 was in many ways about that character arc and the conclusion of that character arc. So this is a great highlight on that because we see in Harry Kim the desire to lead. He didn't just become an officer for no reason. He's an ensign, sure, but he is a bridge officer. He is on the officer track, and that is clearly that is made clear many times, but most especially in this episode. He wants command. And I like that even though the episode ended kind of quickly at the end, it's the other major flaw I mentioned. I'll get to that in a second. He clearly demonstrates that acknowledgement that he isn't a captain yet, but he's going to be. And that right there is something we don't get to see all that often. The raw before they became molded. Kirk, back when he was an ensign, that kind of an idea. You with me? And I just said it again. And I do think Harry Kim's overall command style is leading towards Kirk's. If we were to look at the 4 major captains, yes, I said 4. I would say, okay, fine, 5. If we were to look at the 5 major captains, Archer, I would say without question that Harry Kim's overall command style leads towards the Kirk mentality. It's all about the emotion, it's all about doing, it's all about his personal sense of right and wrong, and his sense of duty and discipline kind of reining that in. Sisko and Kirk actually have a very similar type of mentality to lead. The only difference, Kirk could easily become an admiral. Sisko would never have become an admiral. Now, I do have one last thing to comment on here. I have a couple other small notes on the story. Like, I do like the fact that Harry figured out the plot. I do like that Harry's line, "Someone died following my orders." You know, that's part of Harry Kim's story that I already mentioned. The B plot is ridiculous and stupid. I also give praise to Neelix, because he actually did exactly what he should have done in this episode, in both scenes, really. Especially the first one, though. Because he wasn't telling Harry, "You're an idiot." He was trying to encourage Harry, in his own particular idiom, to act like a captain, even if he wasn't. It's that whole idealism thing all over again. You want to reach for it, damn it. So act like it, and I liked that. But then, there's my last point. The episode wraps up within an exceptionally short period of time. Lord knows this is not the only Star Trek episode to do that. There's a reason the term Pat TV ending exists. But it wraps up so quickly, I didn't even realize the episode ended at first. I'm sitting here, I got my notes, I got my pen, and I'm just like, I was actually in the middle of scribbling the note about Neelix I just mentioned, and the episode ended, and I'm like, what? And I rewound a bit just to watch it again, like, no, yeah, it had ended. It just was like, done. Ended very, very quickly. And it felt like, to me, and this might just be the amateur writing thing again, that the episode was running long on time. In other words, they had more footage than they knew what to do with. And so they had to chop up some of it and wrap up things very, very quickly at the end. And yet, there's a B plot, which has nothing to do at all with the A plot, and has nothing to do with anything at all ever, and is ridiculous and stupid. So, I'm not actually sure what to make of that. Any thoughts? I mean, this is an episode that felt like they had to chop out footage, and yet there's still scenes that have nothing to do with anything, that are there effectively as just a form of padding. By the way, I've mentioned so many times my aggravation with the A-plot, B-plot mentality. This episode might actually be the most severe example I've seen thus far of that, in both Voyager and Babylon 5. The B-plot is so unnecessary. Doesn't add anything to Taurus, doesn't add anything to Icheb. Icheb's overall arc through that B-plot is literally just 7 of 9's arc. It's just repeated. And then there's some other ridiculous things. It's not even funny. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to be negative. I don't want to be too negative about Voyager. Lord knows. I'm sorry. I can't even say that with a straight face. Me being negative about Voyager. Anyways, that's all I got for today. Next week we've got a 2-part. I'm not sure if we're going to do it in 2 parts yet or not. We'll work on that soon. Either way, I'll see you guys next time.